In the final months of her life, Nancy Rooks, Elvis Presley's longtime maid, did something she had never done before.
I was there. You know, they had the funeral at the house. They had the bodies alive there in their state for 3 days.
She broke her silence. She had kept the stories of a man everyone loved about Graceland secret for more than 40 years. But as her health got worse, she said in a whisper, everyone was shocked. It's time I told the whole story.
Had trained her the way that he wanted her to be. And that hurted him when she left him.
What she said wasn't the glowing memorial that fans were hoping for. Instead, it showed a side of Elvis Presley that had been kept secret for decades, a close, sometimes disturbing look at the king behind closed doors. But Nancy, why did you not say anything for so long? What made her finally decide to talk? Let's find out the truth that she's been hiding for years. The silent witness to Elvis Presley's inner world. It was 1964 when Nancy Rooks walked into Graceland. She had no idea that she would meet a famous person. Nana was hired to clean, but she quickly did more than that. She got to know Elvis Presley well and learned a lot about his secret life. In the big, music-filled house that was the center of fame and rock and roll, Nancy saw the king as he really was, not as he was in public. Graceland was more than just a house for a famous person. It was its own world. Nancy was often in the middle of everything. As she walked quietly through the halls, she was always aware of the quiet and the noise. Her view of Elvis was different from everyone else's. She saw him in his pants and asked if there was any bacon left in the kitchen. She didn't see him as famous like other people did. To her, he was just Mr. Elvis, a guy who wanted to eat breakfast alone. The man who ran the music world looked very different in real life. In real life, Elvis was also the king. When he got home, he liked having his own space, even if it was only for a short time. At night, Elvis would walk around the house barefoot and lost in thought, or church music would fill the rooms. A lot of the time, Nancy was there watching the man who wouldn't let many people in. But when she was by herself, she saw something more complicated than anyone thought possible. But Nancy did more than just bring food to Graceland. She became an important part of Elvis's life and helped him with things most people wouldn't even think to do, like getting dressed, choosing clothes, and setting up his room. She learned more and more about how odd his life was as time went on. As Elvis's routine changed all the time, Nancy got used to having wants that changed from late at night to early in the morning. Nancy did know one famous person who wore his fame like a heavy crown, though. The rock star might have been seen by everyone. She felt like she was a part of Graceland as she got used to her job. She was always there, but she never tried to stand out. She saw a side of Elvis that almost no one else ever did. There were hours and hours of worship at Graceland. While everyone else was busy, Nancy stood quietly and watched a much more complicated story play out behind closed doors. But Nancy, why did you choose to be quiet for so long? Was there something about the life she saw at Graceland that she couldn't talk about for decades? Was it for loyalty, fear, or something more? She wasn't quiet because she didn't know what was going on. She saw small moments and strange details that no one else would ever know. Nancy didn't start to hint at the facts she had kept hidden for so long until a long time later, when time was really getting to her. It was like the years of silence were too much for her to handle, and she slowly started to wonder if keeping those lies was really what was best for everyone. But as time went on, Nancy began to leave clues, like parts of a puzzle that no one had ever thought to put together. Was there something darker going on in Elvis's life and death than people thought? If that's the case, what did Nancy see that she had kept from everyone all those years? The story of her quiet is about to go in a new direction that will show more than anyone thought possible. Why Nancy stayed silent for over 40 years. She didn't say a word for more than 40 years, keeping Graceland's secrets safe like a vault. But why did she hide the things she knew about Elvis Presley, even though they showed a very different person from the man everyone loved? She was deeply and unwaveringly committed to the man she worked for, not only as a cleaner, but also as a quiet friend. Nancy didn't just see Elvis as a pop culture star, she had a lot of respect for him. He was at his weakest when she saw him, not on stage, but in his home, when no one was there and the cameras were off. During those quiet times, Nancy learned something that most people never saw. Elvis was a man with problems that didn't show up in public. The mental damage, drug problems, and weak health that no one knew about were all things she saw. But she still didn't say anything. Why? Because taking care of Elvis and his memory was how she showed him the same respect he had always shown her. They weren't just trying to keep secrets, they were also trying to protect the king's image, which millions of fans loved. She wouldn't have said anything because she would have broken his trust in her. So much was going on in the world that she didn't want to add to the chaos. But loyalty comes at a price. Nancy could feel the calm getting heavier as the years went by. She thought she had to deal with a lot of agony because she knew so much, but couldn't tell anyone. She was not only watching out for Elvis, she was also looking out for herself. What would people say if they knew the truth? Would they still adore him? Would people blame her if she stayed quiet for all those years? It was hard for her to keep those lies because they were hurting her heart. But Nancy didn't say anything since she loved Elvis, even if it was hard for her to do so. It wasn't merely a crush on a famous person. Because they were friends and respected one another, she was one of the few people who genuinely knew the man behind the famous. Elvis was the king of rock and roll, but he also realized how vital it was to be friendly to others, especially those who worked for him. Nancy had seen bits of Elvis that no one else had. She saw the Elvis who thanked her for every meal, acted like family, and sang gospel songs with her in the kitchen. He wasn't just an untouchable symbol. He was a guy who lived in the shadows of his own renown and tried to make sense of a society that asked too much of him. It wasn't like they were stars and fans. They respected each other. Nancy wasn't just another housekeeper. She was a steady force in Elvis's crazy life. He was kind to her in ways that most people didn't notice. When he was at home, he didn't need everyone to love him. What he did need was the respect and love of his best friends and family, like Nancy. And the fact that she was connected and respected made her silence even more important. She wasn't lying because she was afraid or didn't care. To protect a man who had been kind to her, she did everything she could. It wasn't just to keep a secret, it was to respect their connection, even if it meant they had to carry that weight by themselves. However, Nancy's health got worse with age, and something changed. It became less of a job and more of a mental burden that she couldn't carry any longer. She had to keep quiet for so long. Certain truths she could no longer hide. Things that were slowly but surely forcing her to finally speak out. She then said, "It's time to tell the whole story." What did that really mean? What had she been keeping from you for so long, and why now? The world didn't know how the truth would change everything as Nancy got ready to tell her story. When she was at Graceland, what did she really see? What new information did she find out about Elvis's last days? It became clear as the truth came out that Nancy had been hiding a lot more than anyone could have thought. Behind Graceland's closed doors, it's easy to forget that Elvis Presley was struggling with more than just the stresses of fame behind the walls of Graceland. Nancy Rooks, the quiet observer, saw the king's private problems firsthand. What she saw was not at all like the perfect legend that the public thought he was. Elvis was more than just the man whose voice thrilled the world. He was also a man who was struggling with addiction and trying to keep control of a world that was getting out of hand. Nancy thought one of the most surprising things about Elvis's life was how much he cared about cleaning. He had to take several showers every day, and it wasn't just for habit. It was a way for him to hold on to something he could control. But this need for order and perfection was just a cover for bigger problems. Elvis was proud of how clean he was, but he was really struggling with an addiction to prescription drugs that was hurting his mind and body. Nancy saw for herself how the man, who used to be full of life and energy, was slowly worn down by the drugs that helped him do his job, but also took away his spirit. Nancy watched in pain as Elvis's health got worse over the years. He was only a shadow of the person he used to be. He wasn't just physically tired, he was also emotionally worn out. Nancy knew the signs, when he would fall asleep in the middle of a talk, or when he seemed lost and like he couldn't handle the attention on him. Fans saw a man who seemed bigger than life, but she saw a man who was tired and just wanted to rest. He could no longer hide behind the shine of the sunlight. The damage to their bodies could not be ignored. Elvis's body, which used to be a sign of rock and roll vigor, was beginning to show signs of wear. He had gained weight, lost energy, and his eyes looked like he was looking for something he couldn't find. Nancy was there for him through all of it, the times he fell apart, the mood swings, and the growing stress that crushed him in ways no one would ever know. She took care of him and became his unspoken friend. Even though she didn't say anything, she felt terrible seeing him fall apart in front of her. Even though Elvis's health was getting worse, people around the world kept worshiping the picture of the man they thought they knew. In public, he was always seen as a stunning rock star who did what he pleased. But Nancy saw a much darker picture of what was going on behind closed doors. She knew the king wasn't as strong as he used to be and couldn't be stopped. His energy was low, and he had mood swings. His addiction to prescription drugs made him weak in ways that his fans would never have guessed. People wouldn't let go of the hero they had created for Elvis, even though he was having problems. They wouldn't accept that the Elvis they loved was slowly disappearing. Nancy found it hard to see this difference between what she saw and what really happened. Everyone else saw a story, but Nancy saw a man fighting a battle no one else knew about. Just as hard on her body was the damage to her emotions. As the years went by, it became harder for Nancy to ignore how her public image was getting worse. How could everyone keep loving someone who was clearly having a hard time? There was a man at Graceland who was falling apart behind closed doors. How could they worship him? In the quiet rooms of Graceland, Nancy knew that what was going on behind closed doors wasn't just a man's problems. It was the slow fall of an icon. Nancy couldn't help but wonder if the world was really ready to know the truth, as Elvis's body and mind continued to get worse. Or would it have been better to keep the legend alive and keep the Elvis picture that everyone loved? The truth couldn't stay hidden forever, though, no matter how loyal Nancy was or how long they kept quiet. What did Nancy finally say that made her speak out? What did she know about the last few days of Elvis's life? that would make everything different? As more lies about Graceland come to light, the shocking truth about Elvis's death is getting closer than anyone thought. Nancy's final confessions. At Graceland, the morning of August 16, 1977, it began like any other. This day would change everything for Nancy Rooks. The king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, had been having health problems for a while. But that morning, something was off about him. He acted with a strange sense of urgency, and Nancy couldn't ignore it. After staying up late to play racquetball with his fiancée, Ginger Alder, and his cousin Billy Smith, Elvis went home. She was already working in the kitchen when he got to Graceland. Elvis was tired, but he was still very polite, as he always was. Nancy asked him if he wanted food, as she always did. But this time, Elvis said no. Instead, he asked for water, which seemed strange at the time, but would make more sense to Nancy afterwards. The strange thing wasn't the request, but how Elvis drank. He took the glass of water and drank it quickly, almost as if he was trying to quench a thirst that went beyond his body's needs. "I've never seen him drink water that way," Pauline, another Graceland maid, would say in the future. It seemed like something was off, but Nancy didn't think about it at the time. It was because Elvis had been up all night, so she thought it was just his normal tiredness. But that strange sense of need never went away. The house was very quiet by mid-morning. The normal busy day didn't happen. No calls came in or guests showed up. But instead, there was a heavy silence in Graceland. This silence would soon feel like a warning. She heard a strange noise coming from upstairs around 9:30 a.m. Not so loud that it sounded like an emergency, but it was scary. After that, there was a strange quiet. Nancy stopped and listened, but she didn't hear anything. She told herself that it was just another strange sound coming from inside the house. At Graceland, life had its own rhythms, and it often felt like something was always out of place. She kept working, but the feeling of unease stayed with her. After that, at exactly 1:50 p.m., the buzzer went off. Ginger Alden's weak and shaking voice came through. "Is there someone down there?" There was a terrible event up here. She felt cold all over. She knew something was wrong right away. As Ginger tried to describe what had happened, her voice was shaking so badly that it was almost unintelligible. The words were hard to hear, though, and Nancy already knew what they were by the time she got upstairs. The awful quiet was broken. Something much worse had happened than a broken glass or an item lost. The first thing Nancy saw when she walked into the bathroom would stay with her forever. Elvis Presley lying still on the bathroom floor. He was still, and even though she had seen him tired before, this was different. The king of rock and roll was dead. He was a man who lived a big life. She felt her heart sink. But that wasn't the end of what happened around Elvis's death. The next thing that happened made things even more confusing and suspicious that day. Because of how chaotic things were, Nancy never said who asked her to clean up before the medical staff got there. This event would stay with her for a long time. What did they want her to do? Is there something that needs to be kept secret? Or is this just an attempt to keep things somewhat normal as a tragedy plays out? It looked like a harmless request at first, but Nancy had a feeling there was more to it than she thought. This wish became one of the most talked about parts of Elvis's death. Something about it made me wonder more than it answered. Why did the people in charge, the medical staff, and Elvis's friends and family let this happen? What did they want to hide? Did Nancy cover up something important without realizing it? For years, she would feel bad about what she did, because it was what she always did. She didn't tell everyone what she had seen. She was haunted by more than just Elvis's quick death. The strange request and parts of the story she didn't fully understand at the time were also there. The world would learn more about the King of Rock and Roll than anyone had ever thought possible as Nancy's silence broke. Was it too late, though? Was the truth about Elvis Presley's death and decline hidden for good? There may be solutions closer than anyone thought. The real story of Elvis Presley's life, along with the hidden facts, was about to come out, one piece at a time. The psychological weight of a life in the shadows. For a long time, Suzanne Rooks kept Elvis Presley's secrets to herself. She didn't say anything while she witnessed the King's ascent and fall, but when she eventually spoke up, it wasn't simply a choice. It was a liberation. It was a way for her to let go after carrying the weight of so many secrets for so long. Nancy didn't really care what other people thought. She was thinking about how much commitment and silence cost. She wanted to find out more about Elvis and the man who made him famous. But could she truly have done that job for so long? The emotional cost was very high. As time went on, Nancy began to feel the weight of the lies she had said. She had been his friend, helped him, and watched over him in quiet, keeping up the image of the man everyone adored. But how much does it cost? By telling the truth, she wasn't just defending Elvis. She was also safeguarding the myth that others had made up about him. She didn't say something because she was scared. She did it to honor a man she really looked up to. But in the end, the heaviness of that silence was too much to handle. She felt bad for not telling people things that could have impacted how they felt about Elvis and how they felt about her. This was her test of commitment. Nancy didn't just come up to say what she knew. She did it to be free. She didn't tell the truth because she was scared of getting in trouble. She did it to protect the King's reputation. But when she eventually told everyone what was going on at Graceland, it was like she was letting go of a story that no one else could tell for years. Did guilt make her do it? Or did they know they had to confess the truth before it was too late? Her choice showed how loyal she was and how hard it is to live in the shadow of a hero. When the truth of a famous person is questioned, it's normal for people to have different reactions to what Nancy says. Some admirers who had admired Elvis for a long time were astonished to hear that he had problems that they never believed he would have. They didn't like that Nancy was honest, since it ruined the picture they had worked so hard to keep up. They couldn't imagine that the man who had inspired so many people could be anything but ideal. The reality was a betrayal to them because it may ruin the fantasy they had built up about Elvis's life. Some individuals, on the other hand, believed it was bold of Nancy to speak out and try to convey more about the man behind the song. People who published biographies, studied, or were very interested in Elvis's life enjoyed Nancy's ideas because they added to a wider, more complicated story. Her admissions didn't make Elvis less amazing. In fact, they made him more lovable. Elvis was more than simply a pop cultural character. He was a genuine guy with flaws, shortcomings, and difficulties. Some others considered that Nancy's honesty gave Elvis's memory the respect of truth, instead of the polished image that had been skillfully kept up for decades. The truth about Graceland is a lot more complicated than the perfect picture Elvis Presley gave the world. Nancy Rooks, a woman who lived with him for more than 10 years, has shown us that the truth behind the story is often much sadder and human than anyone could have imagined. From how loyal she was to how she finally chose to speak out, Nancy's story shows that behind every famous person is a person who is fighting their own fights. The last things Nancy said about Elvis have changed the way we think about him and shown us the struggles of people who live in the shadows of heroes. What do you think? Was Nancy's silence a way for her to protect herself, or was she holding on to something more? Do you think that the truth she told has changed how we think about Elvis Presley's legacy? Leave your thoughts in the box below. Also, don't forget to like and follow for more stories that aren't in the news. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more fascinating content coming your way.